Well, hello there, and welcome to a slightly later than usual literary as FECK with me, Clive Davis, and him over there.
Yes, someone who you haven't seen in a while. It's old Nick himself. The devil, Satan, whatever else. Yeah, no, it's me. I'm back from my extended time away. I'm terrified to know what Clive has been putting that down to, because I haven't had a chance to watch many of the episodes that he's done while I was away.
That's why you're not angry, because you haven't actually seen what.
I can only imagine the lies he's been telling about why I haven't been on the show. So I did, in fact, move house. That's why I haven't been around, in case there's other stories floating around the internet.
House. Yes. Which is, I suppose, going to prison for a little time is a sort of moving house.
So it is. Yes, you're right.
Yeah. Setting up residency in a different place. But anyway, you're not doing those things anymore now, are you, Nick?
No. I'm back on the straight and narrow again. And reading books, reading exceedingly long books that Clive has recommended. So we're gonna talk about this. So
like Mr.
Massive Home. Did you know it was
exceedingly good kicks?
Did you? Yes. Did you know it was that? I mean, because do you have a paperback copy of it? Because I read it on my. There we go. Yeah. So it's funny. It doesn't look as big as it feels, which is strange when you read. Oh, yes, that's what she said. But no, it was a case where I was reading it on my Kindle, and it just felt like I wasn't moving the needle at all. I'd be 6-7 pages, and it wouldn't have moved a percentage point.
I'm having that at the moment. I'm attempting to get through as much of the Golden Lotus as I can before we talk about it on a future. That's our next Shaw Brothers thing, and it's just there's no way I'm reading the whole thing. I'm just trying to get a sense of it. But yes, The Public Burning by Robert Coover,
who I've never heard of. This is the first time I have ever heard his name.
I think this is his most famous book from 1977, and I feel as if it's not fallen out of favor, but it's just fallen out of the zeitgeist a little bit. I get the feeling that this was a fairly revered book when new, but has gone by the wayside a little bit, and it sounded of interest. So I thought we'd give it a go. Originally published in 1977, and I mean,
what's going on for Richard Nixon in 1977? That's the question that I had. I was trying to think about where this falls in relation. So this is,
well, he's out of office by 77.
Oh yeah, definitely, because that's prime malaise years, right? That's Jimmy Carter.
The first Nixon interviews been yet? I'm not sure.
But he did he directly precede Carter? And then was Carter voted in basically out of
No, Carter was later, wasn't he?
Well, Jimmy Carter was like 76 to 1980.
Yeah.
Right. So who's between though? Because Nixon stepped down, and there was his VP, I believe, or somebody else had to step in. Right. There was a few years there where there was basically a fill-in president. Right.
Gerald Ford.
Ford. Yes, that's who it is. It's Ford.
Right.
And then it is. I'm sure it goes Ford Carter. So I think it is. It's not that long after his. No.
I mean,
resignation in disgrace.
Yeah, that's 73, something like that.
Okay.
Right. But this book goes way back to 53, when he was Veep, and so this is
under Eisenhower, right?
Yeah. This is a fictionalized, heavily fictionalized kind of retelling of the not so much the trial's already been done, dusted, of the execution of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, the only Americans to be executed espionage, right?
Yeah.
For allegedly selling atomic secrets to the Soviets. Something that has been heavily contested over the years, whether they were even guilty at all, right? Especially right, from what I understand.
Seems like her brother's a real piece of shit, which I didn't actually know much about the case until reading this, but having then gone on and poked around a little bit on Wikipedia and stuff, he doesn't come off well in the book, and he really doesn't come off well in real life.
Yeah, well, I should point out as well, actually, it's a good point to point out that you're not necessarily going to learn about the case from this book. And I think that's the mistake I made choosing, because I chose this book because I knew it wasn't nonfiction. I knew it was kind of, but I thought it was going to be a pretty straight down the line telling of the Ethel and Julius, and that's what I expected.
That is not what this is.
No, so I still, because I'm not overly, I know of the case from various sources linked with it, because there's a lot of people involved as well as Nixon. You've got people like Roy Cohn, right, and McCarthy as well, and
all those dirty tricks kinds of
So reading other books and watching other movies and stuff about those people, you hear about the Rosenbergs case, right, and Alger Hiss as well, right, which is the alluded to.
And Sacco and Vanzetti come up a few times as well, which because they were the previous big leftists get murdered by the state, under contested evidence, kind of,
Right. So yeah, I have still to properly read the proper history of the Rosenbergs case, and so that's something I'm still keen to do, because it is a fascinating story, actually. But yeah, just so you know, that's not what you're getting here. So if you don't know anything about the Rosenbergs at all, you should probably excuse me, read around first, because otherwise you might be under the misapprehension that they were executed in Times Square with rollers, which didn't happen. Just in case you thought, because that's the kind of thing you'd read and you, hang on, I can't believe I've never heard of this. An execution.
I know. There was a few moments where I was like, did that? No, that kind of happened.
No, they were executed as usual in execution in Sing Sing, I believe. But for the this, so this is
I think it's worth bringing up the structure of the book, because it's an odd thing, right? So basically, every other chapter is from the point of view of an imagined Richard Nixon, right? A first person.
Yes, there's a lot more Richard Nixon than I expected. I have to admit, I didn't realize it was so.
He has more of the books than I really.
Yeah, it's either him or Uncle Sam, or the Phantom, who's like the shadow
personification of creeping socialism or whatever, right?
And occasionally it veers into things like there's like a bit which reads like a script from like a Jack Benny episode of the Jack Benny Show, or Groucho Marx, or it has a lot of it's broadly it's satire, right? It's basically it's a satirical take on the kind of ludicrousness of the Rosenbergs case. And yeah, satire is, I mean, overall, I mean, we'll get into things I liked and disliked, but overall, this is a bit broad and heavy-handed for me. I don't like my it's funny, actually, on the back of the book, Jeffrey Wolf from the New Times is quoted as saying, I would guess that since World War II, only Lolita, Invisible Man, and Catch-22 are in the public burnings class for durability, blah, 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 blah. So he's very, but for me, the important one there is Catch-22, because that's another Joseph Ellis Catch-22. That's one of those books, again, considered like revered
Right.
And I remember not getting on with Catch-22. I don't know if you've read Catch-22.
I don't know if I ever have. I think I've seen the film, and I have vague feelings that I might have tried it and not liked it much. I remember liking Slaughterhouse-Five much more.
Yeah, Catch-22, from as much of it, I was quite surprised. I don't know if it's just, being badly dated or something, but I was like, oh my God, this is about as subtle as a brick in the face, right? Like this, I'm not getting on with this at all, but it is considered like an absolute classic, right? And Public Burning for me felt a little bit like that. And I'm wondering if I hadn't chosen it for this, I'm wondering if I would have finished it or not, to be honest, because I think the reason, I think what kept me going was because it has this great reputation. And to be honest, parts of it are fun.
Yes.
Especially the
I
Richard
actually
Nixon
think the first half of the book is more interesting and more readable for me than the last half. I found it gets like increasingly
opposite for me, but
oh really? Okay.
yeah.
I found the hyperbole of the latter part and the broad kind of comedy and them slipping through elephant shit and all of this kind of like troweling on this kind of stuff. I was like, okay, all right. And that's also at that point, I've been reading it for so long. The book is so long, right? That I'm like, I'm just tired of it. Whereas at the beginning, it seemed fresher and newer to me in a way. And it reminded me a little bit of there was a stream of consciousness around, especially the parts that aren't Richard Nixon. I mean, obviously he's a kind of a stream of consciousness narrative, but the other stuff is truly like, if it had 3 periods between each sentence, it gets into Cellini territory, not as good as.
No.
But then Miller, so Henry Miller famously, right, lifted Celine's style and did it less interestingly, I think, less effectively, and left out the 3 periods. And it reminded me a little bit of which I guess would have been written just a few years before, was Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail. Which is also all about Richard Nixon, right? And the McGovern-Nixon, campaign. So yeah, I don't know. It was, there was stuff that was, because there are a lot of kind of snapshots of what's going on in the world at the time, what's going on in Korea, what's going on in Eastern Europe, like these kind of flashpoints of like, and that stuff was interesting for me because I think a lot of that was real. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't.
Yeah.
And then the book becomes increasingly unhinged and untethered from reality in a way.
Yes. I suppose what I was hoping for, I was hoping, because it has this good reputation among some people, like I said, maybe somewhat diminished now over the years, but I was hoping it would build up like a cumulative head of steam, and then the end would have made it, I'm glad I got there, right. This was worth it. But not really. I still think this is a joke that could have been told in about a quarter of the page count. Right?
Yes, I think that more than anything else, I feel like it's just over long, it's over bloated for the payoff. But I will say the very last scene is fairly dark.
Yeah. That's good.
I was like,
yes, that's almost, that's kind of what I was hoping for.
That was just about worth the wait.
Yeah, but it wasn't quite. It was a lot of shoe leather to get to that punchline. But yeah, no, you're quite right. That did take me aback a little bit. I was like, oh, okay, they went there. That's kind of interesting. And also some of when the execution finally happens as well, that's fairly grim because there's like, he makes it doesn't quite work out right, and then there's an added kind of where they have to pull the switch again, and that's like really quite horrible the way that
and they do get into the mechanics of what the the machine does and how they shave them. There was a few moments where it gave me the jitters just thinking about the process of
But the thing is, for me, the bits that are more, I actually quite like. I'm quite impressed that, I mean, the Richard Nixon that comes through seems really quite authentic.
I know.
It's kind of amazing.
I agree.
Especially that, like he seems to have got the measure of him back then, right? Without years and years of things coming out and more things about the tapes coming out, and like you're wondering how much he had to work on other than what was in the public knowledge, right?
Yeah.
But I get the sense that this is a very
the self-pitying, the self-aggrandizing, the kind of like, yeah, I mean, he's a really, and in a weird way, the almost sympathetic monster,
right?
You know what I mean? Like, because he's a very easy person to caricature, right? I mean, Nixon,
yes.
And yet this is a strangely not flattering at all, but I don't know. There's something about it that rings really real. I really wondered, because Nixon was so obsessed with himself. Did he read it? And I'd love to know if he did.
Yeah.
Did he read all 700 and whatever pages of it?
Because he is a fascinating character. I mean, like, to have attained like basically the highest office in the world and still be
so paranoid.
Yeah, and just
vengeful
and self-assured in every possible way. It's remarkable. You'd think getting to be president of the United States would satisfy any.
You wouldn't have all these resentments you're hanging on to from high school still.
It's amazing. It's because usually people who do carry all that stuff around with them, it's baggage that would stop them from getting anywhere near
somehow as grist for his mill.
Yeah, so it's amazing. In a way, it's amazing. It's like he's climbed.
He was the first truly rage-based. Well, I bet the first. I would say that probably Donald Trump is the second rage-based president. Like out of a sense of public humiliation, I will show you all.
Absolutely, it's amazing in a way. It's like you imagine a mountain climber getting up to something. It's like a mountain climber who's decided to strap an elephant to his back or something. It's like, but yeah. So I was impressed by how Robert Coover did really manage to, like you said, put together a relatively sympathetic, but just seemed quite authentic. Like even when it goes into the weirdest flights of fantasy parts, like when he's making out with Ethel Rosenberg just before that stuff,
it still seems weirdly real.
Yeah. The bits that work least well for me are anything to do with Uncle Sam.
Oh, some of that I didn't mind. I thought his dialogue was enjoyably folksy, and then as he becomes more and more of a psychopath, I thought there was something nice about that. There was something, when it comes to the U.S., right? And it comes to, really any nation, right? Like to have a real ability to look yourself hard in the face and to be like, this is what our country really is or has done, right? There are moments in the book that I think are effective in that way.
Conceptually, I like it. I think it's more of a personal thing for me. I've always found that because it's kind of a variation on the cowboy sidekick Fuzzy St. John varmint kind of. I always find that stuff irritates the fuck out of me. So I think that's personal. That kind of straight talking, darn tootin' kind of character almost rubs me the wrong way. And I suppose it's supposed to rub you the wrong way to a certain extent. So it's arguable that it's doing what it's supposed to do. But those passages they seemed interminable. Whereas when I got into Richard Nixon's headspace, those pages kind of flew by.
Yes.
So it's an odd one. It's I suppose a curate's egg or something, I suppose is the phrase I'm looking for. Like it's not without interest, and it is definitely impressive. And I mean, I before reading it, I didn't think of it as a book about Richard Nixon. I didn't expect that. Now, in retrospect, I'm wondering if you're really interested in Richard Nixon, this book should be on your reading list, right?
Right. Along with that previously mentioned. So actually, that's funny. But yeah, that previously mentioned Hunter Thompson book. But But the other thing that it would be easy to do is Richard Nixon wrote a lot, right?
Yes.
As president, before as VP, he wrote books. So inhabiting his voice may have been easier. Like he wrote a book called. So I know this because. So I worked, as you know, and probably people at home know if they've been watching this long enough. I worked for a while at a museum. Well, maybe I haven't talked about this on the show. Anyway, I worked for a while at a museum in Kelowna, British Columbia, and at one point I was allowed into. They had like an off-site building where they had the entire collection of a local politician, a guy called W.A.C. Bennett or Wacky Bennett, who had been the premier of the entire province at one point, but he lived in Kelowna. And then his son, actually, some years later. But I think in the kind of 60s, he was the late 50s, 60s, he was the leader of something called the Social Credit Party, which doesn't exist anymore. I think it was kind of his own thing. Anyhow, and his family was instrumental in having the bridge built in Kelowna that connects Kelowna to West Bank, which means you no longer have to take a ferry across. So, anyway, important in this very small part of the world. But in this collection, there was this massive collection of books in there that came from his library and were donated, I guess, when he passed on to the museum. And I was going through them, and I was like, "Oh, there's a copy of like Leon Uris's Trinity, right? Which I've never read, but it's signed to him by Leon Uris." I was like, "Oh, that's interesting. How many of these books are signed?" And then I pulled out Richard Nixon's Six Crises, and there on the inside cover, it's signed to, William Bennett, All Might Love, whatever, Richard M. Nixon. And I had one of those moments you have in life where you're like, no one's paying any attention to this stuff down here. No one's checking on the stuff. I don't think there's an itemized list of what's down here. This would be a very easy thing for me to take and just put in my bag and go home with.
I remember now, this was around the time you bought that new Cadillac, wasn't it?
It is actually, interesting enough, yes. And so I had I was 23 at the time. I think I had a bit of an internal struggle and ended up not doing it because all I thought was like, well, it would live in my possession the rest of my life, but it could never be sold on because it was so obviously, it was signed from and to, like the signature was it was clearly it would clearly have been stolen from.
You would need a very weirdly specific sort of fence for that, wouldn't you? Like some kind of literary fence or something like that.
Yes. So, but I still occasionally I'm still like, but I could have, and I if I had no interest, because that's the thing I was thinking. Well, what if I just didn't sell it? What if I had Richard Nixon's autograph on my bookshelf? What a weird thing that would be.
Yeah,
but I don't.
I mean, sometimes
it's still in the museum.
Right. I mean, sometimes theft is a good thing. I mean, that's how I got to read Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, because I was stealing a copy that no one else seemed to be using. So
stealing a copy from.
This is when I worked in a supermarket a couple of days a week, and it was a. Sorry, I have a cold, by the way, which is why I'm all snotty and noisy, and but
not COVID, which I had a couple of weeks ago and kicked the living shit out of me. But anyway.
So the back of the supermarket was like a residential house, an old house. So like all our stock was kept in like bedrooms and things. So we had a small warehouse, but then you went up, we had to stack like boxes of crisps and things. And
is this in Wales?
Yeah.
This seems very Welsh or very Celtic to me.
How dare you?
I could easily see this in Ireland. In Ireland as well.
So it was just a house full of crisps and toilet papers and stuff like that. And there was a rickety wooden shelf there with a bookshelf with no other books on it apart from one paperback copy of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas from.
That was obviously meant for you. There's no question.
Yeah, almost like glowing, from like the early 70s or something. And I'd only just recently become aware of it as well. Like it was something that I would have recognized. Maybe a few years previous to that, I would have just don't know what that is. But I was like, I'll have that. And yeah, I didn't hear anyone say, "Has anyone seen my copy of Hearing Loneliness?" It was in the back room of the supermarket, which is a house filled with boxes of crisps. So yeah, and I think I still have that copy. Actually, I think I still have it to this day.
Nice.
But yeah. Anyway,
but it wasn't signed. Yeah. It wasn't signed to Richard Nixon from Hunter S. Thompson, so therefore, you can probably
no. That would have been something. That would have been yeah. But anyway, back to this public burning. I mean, what else do we have to say about it, if anything?
Yeah, I don't know that I could strongly recommend it. I mean, I think as I said, if you have an interest in Richard Nixon and you want to see a weirdly nuanced like hatchet job, I think it's quite fun. If you're interested in, I guess, the state of mind, maybe the hysteria, the mass panic of that 50s Cold War, fear of this kind of fifth column of communism, it's interesting. But it's not hugely entertaining. It's not a massive page turner. It's not
the classic I was expecting, and also it's not really going to teach you anything about the Rosenbergs.
No.
So with that caveat, I mean,
your mileage may vary, readers.
Yeah, like I said, it's probably above all else, it's for Nixon enthusiasts, I suppose, which was not something I was expecting. There's another fiction book. There's an E.L. Doctorow book called The Book of Daniel, right, which is about the Rosenbergs' son.
Okay.
To get to the bottom of, what happened to them and why and stuff like that, which they turned into a film.
Their kids are still, I believe they're still alive, and they're still kind of in the process of attempting to prove their innocence and stuff.
Right. Yeah, so I would like to read a book about the Rosenbergs and non-fiction, so I shall choose a bit more carefully next time. But there we go.
Was there not a TV series done not that long ago for, like one of those Netflixy kind of streaming services? I thought
about the Rosenbergs. Yeah, I don't know if it was all about them, but that story turned up in something, right?
Right, or was it generally about that era of like spies and Soviet stuff and
yeah, but I can't remember what.
Yeah, me neither.
There we go. Brilliant.
But they have just know that they have
that was a good section of the show.
They've recently been sort of back in the public eye in some fictionalized form.
It's one of those it's one of those huge scandals of its day that is largely forgotten by most people, right? I would say. Anyway, we're banging on now, and I should probably not be. I just realized that sucking on a lozenge and having a blocked nose means that I intermittently can't breathe, and not being able to breathe is not quite good for doing these things.
Public. It does impact the public speaking somewhat.
Right. So I'm going to go.
All right.
Yes. So until next time, more literary FECK-ness.
Yes, we'll see you sooner than later, and I won't be going back. I've learned the error of my ways. I'll be staying out of the pokey.
Yes, good lad.
Yes.
You are not a crook.
No.